Well, hello, everybody. I'm Zias Caravallo from ZK Research, and I'm here for another ZKast Thought Leadership episode. And as always, this ZKast is done in conjunction with my media partner eWEEK as part of his eSpeak series. This time, I'm delighted to have the incomparable John Chambers, CEO of JC2 Ventures. Most people would probably know him as the former CEO of Cisco Systems. John, it's been a while. I'm thrilled that you're here with me. I understand that you created your own venture capitalist firm, and why don't you just tell everybody what you've been doing for the last 5-6 years?
Zias, first of all, it's a pleasure to be back with you. You've always kept me on my toes over 2 decades of working back and forth, and your advice, candidly, is really sound both for your customers, but more importantly for me as a business leader. I've learned an awful lot together in terms of the direction. I also want to congratulate you. One of the things I like about videos, we get to watch how people change. I've lost a little bit of hair over the last 5 years. You've got yourself in really great shape. Congratulations on that. And obviously, you're enjoying life. What I did when I left Cisco is I made a conscious decision to move on to the next chapter and to do it with arm's length relationship with Cisco. Let the new leadership team run the company. I won't comment positively or negatively about how they do. It's their company to run. But I wanted to try to change the world one more time. And you could make an argument we did that with the internet when we said in 93 that the internet was going to change the way the world works, lives, learns, and plays. And clearly I was moving around zeros and ones through routers to changing business models, how you change your daily life, et cetera. And I think most people would agree that we probably played as dominant a role in making that change as any company in the world, and an honor to do so, and to the benefit of our shareholders, our employees, and our customers in a fun way. In terms of what I'm doing now is that I believe the future of almost all job creation will come from small to medium business getting bigger, i.e. startups. And that the large companies over the next decade, I don't know one that isn't trying to reduce its headcount and dramatically improve its productivity. And so in total, the big companies will not add any incremental headcount. Doesn't matter if you're in the US, Europe, or Asia. It will be through startups. So getting startups going at a much faster pace. And that's where the innovation comes, because a startup, venture capitalists have a window of 7 to 10 years on their expectations, where large companies who are trying to do innovation have a window usually of this quarter or next year in terms of the direction. And then the startups are able to attract talent in a way the large companies no longer can, regardless of which company it is, whether it's the top PhDs in AI or the top young entrepreneurs coming out of the business schools, et cetera. So to do that and do it in the US, trying to do it across all 50 states, which means maybe 10 states that I'll personally invest in, and then do it as France as part of President Macron, the French president's focus. I'm his high-tech ambassador for the globe. And with Modi in India, he's been kind enough to the prime minister there to call me his global ambassador and to work very closely with him on his digital plan for his country, which again needs to generate 1.2 million jobs per month, and huge job creation engine as well as startup engine. So I'm having the time of my life. It's like the early days of Cisco all over, except and I have a shareholder vote of 1, so we can move with speed and we can take risk. And I love taking risk, as you know, and trying to get market trends right.
Yeah, you were obviously right about the internet changing the way we lived. In fact, I remember those early days when you made some statements that people thought were crazy back then, right? That the internet would be everywhere and all voice would be over the internet and things like that. You had some of the biggest companies in the world, in fact, telling you that you're wrong. So kudos to you on that. Now, you did that, but I think a lot of what you did back then was you focused on buying smaller companies and bringing them into Cisco. And it seems like JC2 Ventures is set up a lot like that, where you're focused on early stage companies. And you seem to have always had this passion for early stage, versus later stage. Why is that? What do you like about the early stage?
Well, the exciting thing about the early stage, my ideal acquisition was about 100 engineers, 125 people in the company. And that's my ideal stage of investing as well. So, what the market would call late Series A, early Series B investments in startups. And what's exciting about it is they are just getting their products to market. And you can watch what I watch for. I don't invest in a technology. I invest in a business model change occurring enabled by new technology. So back to the internet days, Jeff Bezos, who's a good friend, we went back and forth on how the internet would change retail forever, and he rewrote the books using that for Amazon. Now you see that occurring not just across the Netflix, but with every company about how does this new technology completely transform a segment of the business. So I try to pick a market transition going on, combine that with a business model change equivalent, and that's when I bet. And it may not be fair, but I get my pick of any startup in the world. I'm limited to just 3 countries, and they usually do it at pretty favorable terms, both financially and with options. And so I've got 20 startups in this category. I haven't changed. Number 1 or number 2 is my goal, but I do bet earlier to your point, and I don't have quite the engine behind me in terms of a large sales force and a customer sales force and a service organization, but we've been very successful so far. Average company's growing at about 50% per year. Wow. And growing headcount at over 40% per year, which is the job creation engine, the goal that I have there. So it's the most fun I've ever had, and I don't do anything. I wish I was a better person as this, but I only do the things I love. And if I don't want to do something, I just don't. It's
well, fair enough. Yeah, that ever since I've known you, and which is a long time, there's 2 words that you said over and over, and that's market transitions. You always talk about the importance of catching market transitions. And I think that's coupled with the fact that more than any other leader, you've always had this uncanny ability to see around the corner where other companies really struggle with this, right? So help me understand, or help the people watching this understand, what are some of the things, if you look around that corner, what are some of the things that are coming, and what kind of market transitions is that going to drive?
So the market transitions, and let me just parallel to kind of build the case that you set up very nicely that we did at Cisco. Now what we're changing is we saw the market transitions, the role of the internet changing from just moving around bits and bytes, et cetera, to changing the way you work. We saw it changing from being primarily routers to switches. And we combined with 3 switching acquisitions, what became a $13 billion a year business for us. We then saw the movement to the cloud. So we moved into the wide area networking service providers. We then saw the movement to wireless. We moved there. We saw with the bird flu pandemic in 2006 down in Mexico, and I was the president of Mexico at the time when it broke, and we thought it was going to really be bad. Unfortunately, it was not near as bad as anticipated because nobody got together that evening for dinner. They thought it was going to be so contagious. And we innovated what you see now, which is telepresence and true video in volume for businesses, et cetera. And then we focused on the cloud moving to the edge. So the same thing now. I watch what are the new business model changes, and then what are the new technologies coming out of it. The one that I'm most excited about, and I think it will actually rival the internet, is artificial intelligence. Yeah, I think it's going to dramatically change business. And just like the internet, there'll be early functions within a business that it will change before it changes the whole business. And so that's why you will see some failures in AI as well, that people will move before it's ready for prime time, or they won't change the business model at the same time they change the technology. So AI in areas of customer service, call centers, I think is the hottest area going right now in the business segment of it. I have a couple of companies in that category, Unifor and ASAP, and indirectly companies like Sprinkler and Pindrop that are off to a very great start and getting good traction in it. Cybersecurity is really hot. I've got 8 companies in various levels of cybersecurity, from very secure phones to the type of company that can prevent the solar winds type of attack, with a company called Versec on it. So again, following market transitions, and I watch and I listen to customers. Steve Jobs just somehow knew what to build, but it took him 7 years. When I get an idea and a focus, then I go straight to enterprise customers or service providers or governments and say, what do you think? And when you see a government or a business saying, that is what I need, and I really like this company, and even though they're a very small company with 100 people, John, I think if you got behind them, you could help them be successful. That's when I invest. So it's an instant replay in many ways. It's even more fun than before, because then I get to stay with them entirely focused on their growth. And growth is exciting. You sometimes forget how much fun it was to grow at 70% a year for a decade. It really is a rush.
Yeah, so most of the people watching this video will be IT people, but I also have a handful of investors that follow. And I wanted to shift gears a little bit here and ask you, obviously the way you invest in early stages, one way, obviously to create value. But SPACs have also been way up this year too. In fact, I would say for the last couple of years, people and most investors didn't even know what a SPAC was. Right. So, but we've seen a rise in those. Why is that? What's changed in the market that's made that such a popular investment vehicle?
Well, it is fascinating because about 9 or 10 months ago, CNBC gave me a heads up. They were going to ask me about SPACs on one of my monthly sessions with them. And I had to do my homework to really understand them well, because at that time they'd been around for a decade, but they hadn't been a very useful engine to really bring new companies to market. And there'd been a lot of breakage on it because often the leaders leading the SPAC did not necessarily have operational experience or particularly good at picking companies out, or they picked weak companies that later failed. That is changing rapidly. And the reason it's changing is the tremendous availability of money, and the IPO process just takes too long. And so if you can use a special purpose acquisition committee, i.e. a company, blank check company, that goes public and then can reverse acquire a company and take it public quicker, then that's a tremendous vehicle for it. And you get to actually pick your shareholders. So I was very concerned over the last decade as companies waited longer and longer to go public. I don't think that's good for private markets. I don't think it's good for the American investor, because she or he can't bet on the company till it's out in the market at $50 billion valuation. And that's just too late to get the type of leverage. Where at Cisco, we took the company public at 70 million in sales. And if you invested $1 the day we went public, you'd made $1,500 on it. Unbelievable returns, and lots of millionaires created on it. But from your also, not just your investors, but from your technical audience, SPACs allow a company to get access to funds much quicker. So you can all of a sudden, and I will have 4 or 5 of my companies probably do a SPAC in the next 18, 24 months, maybe more, but allows us to get access to capital quickly and say, here's where we're going to be 3 to 5 years out. So you can invest the extra money in engineering or in a sales go-to-market type of strategy and scale more. Will there be more breakage and failure? Absolutely, because you're going public earlier, which got sheltered from the investors before. But the returns in total, and this is why you don't bet on a single company, should be dramatic as well. So I think they're a good thing. The quality of companies using it to go public are increasing wise. And for your consumers of these type of technologies, it gives a level of financial security they don't get with a regular startup.
One of the things you had talked about, the technology that you mentioned, artificial intelligence, and you said it could be as big as the internet. Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to ask you. It's like, how big can AI be, and how do we, how will this manifest itself into our society? Because clearly, the internet has been weaved through our society in every way, shape, and form. We can't do anything without the internet today, right? Yes. And is that what we're looking for with artificial intelligence, and how does that manifest itself?
Absolutely. And I think it will be as big, and I actually believe it will be bigger. Remember, the internet really came from something that when I joined Cisco, people wrote me complaint letters about my truck drivers, the Cisco food truck drivers. Yeah. And it wasn't until about 92, 93 that people realized, wait a minute, that's not the company I joined. It's a different company on it. And so it takes a while for it to really gain the traction, but I think it will be every aspect of our lives. It will start out in business, and it will start probably in customer services, call centers, et cetera, probably move into sales and marketing, then every aspect of business. And it will transfer all the way down to our individual lives, whether it's self-driving cars, the ability to doctors give you better diagnosis based upon the information they repeat, improvement in their bedside manner and how they deliver their messages, et cetera. So I think the impact on it is almost unlimited. You have to be careful to pick the right applications at the right time, and realize that if you're doing an application area that hasn't been proven to be successful, if all you do is automate it and you don't change the process, you're going to be disappointed in the outcome. So use it in the right way, sequence in it, getting with with companies that have a track record of being able to deliver on both AI, the concept, but more importantly, on the application target area you're after, I think is key.
Yeah, it's interesting that that you said that one of the use cases. It's funny with artificial intelligence. Whenever I talk to people about it, they're always dead set against it until they try it, and then they realize it's a better way. In fact, I had a conversation with the Mass General Hospital in Boston, where the doctors were dead set against using AI for MRIs until they realized they could spend so much more time treating patients and less time doing diagnosis. And so,
absolutely.
So if your favorite 2-word expression is market transitions, your favorite 3-word expression is follow the money. And so you brought up
follow the money, GE that I got from Jack Welch and Jeff Immelt on it. But follow where the VCs are investing. You usually see what is next in the product category. And just like the internet early on, the first applications in business were entering orders online, then doing customer service online. And even though we at Cisco invented a virtual close your business in 24 hours, anytime you want, you know where you are, that was a pretty complex application area that most companies took a decade or two to implement as well.
So you talked about customer service and sales being the short-term impact of AI. What's after that?
I think it will go into every aspect of our lives. You talked earlier about healthcare and medicine. You talk about people providing services of all type to us, retail services, et cetera. So I don't think there's a job that a decade from now will not be using AI in a meaningful way. Just like from 1990s to 2000 plus, there isn't a job that doesn't use the internet in some aspect. And then we've learned to use it actually in our personal lives again and again. But think of it as if you're a baseball fan, a 9-inning baseball game, we were on the top of the first inning. So we're just getting started. There are going to be some strikeouts and some ugly swings. But overall, I think you're going to see some very exciting changes, great companies and great productivity, as well as changing our lives and society as well.
So you mentioned jobs, and that's one thing I hear about with AI, the impact of jobs. And there's a lot of concern that it's going to kill off some jobs, and I think it will at the mark in some aspects. But how do you see AI impacting labor?
Well, I think just like the internet did, I think it's an instant replay, except at maybe 3 times the speed. When we brought the internet out, everybody said, well, it's going to dramatically change jobs because all the people entering orders online, entering orders, keying it in, no longer did. You just captured the orders at the time they came into the company. Customer service, 85% of our customer service was done without human intervention, et cetera. And there are many other areas. And people say, why aren't you going to destroy more jobs than you create? And the answer is absolutely not. Because so many of the additional value added and the market moving up market jobs that it created will be a smooth up and to the right. No, it will be kind of a bumpy type of progression. But it does speak to jobs in the large companies in total will be less a decade from now. And I don't want to mislead anybody on that. And they're going to focus on productivity and actually decreasing expenses. That's why the startup world and the small companies who will become the great companies of the future are so important to the future of our country here in the US and globally as well.
Yeah, one company that you're an early stage investor in that's really attacking the labor part of the contact center is a company called Unifor that does conversational AI. And conversational AI has exploded, right? You're seeing that be used to everything from ordering pizza to navigating your car. So there's a number of companies that are trying to do that, though, including some big cloud companies. What did you specifically like about them?
I think it goes back to 3 things. It's the market transition around AI, with the first area being the customer experience. That something, Zayas, that you'll remember, I said voice will be free. And of course, the service providers hated that when I said that in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
But it was saying the business model is changing. You better move to data and video, and you better add value beyond transport, or it's going to be an ugly future in terms of your profits and growth. It's getting those trends right and the direction that goes with it. Unifor, I think, is a great example, run by really, really very strong CEO, Umesh, 34 years old, and extremely, extremely capable. And they're growing at about 300% a year. But what they did is take conversation and look at it as the primary way that you're still going to interface to your customers, and even the way that you get leverage off of that to make when you call a customer representative at your credit card company or at your bank or in a service call, where the agent immediately knows how many times you've called in the last 3 months. Is this your third call on the same issue? They know your frustration level. The robot literally talks to them as you go through answering questions, make suggestions on it. This is the third call. Isaiah's coming in. We did not execute well. We're going to send this check out to him on his invoice requested. It actually went out yesterday. And is there anything else I can do to help you, sir? That's a lot different call than what is your birth date? What is your security number? What device are you coming off of? I didn't know you'd called before. Let me go find out the records. Can I call you back tomorrow? And somebody else calls you back tomorrow. So it will change in very, very fun ways, mainly for the better, to your point about a doctor. Here's the most likely diagnosis, but when you read the MRI, here's some things you should be aware of. And then for doctors, they can occasionally be very abrupt in the bedside manner, which I had 2 parents who were doctors, and that isn't necessarily good. It scares us to death as patients, but the ability to do it in a little bit smoother fashion and to be able to anticipate the person's next question, have it pop up on the doctor's screen based upon the question the patient just asked you. They're probably going to ask you this one. Here's some of the data that you may want to use and sharing it with them. I think it makes the doctors better, and I think just like it does service people better, answering your credit card question, etc.
Well, if you can get my airline and my mobile phone company doing that, kudos to you. So
well, interestingly enough, the biggest markets are call center agents of all type, and the airlines who have traditionally had poor customer service, as we all know, are adapting the technology at a remarkably fast pace, even though they're in financial challenging situations. So it speaks to most companies have used this reset that occurred over the last year, a terrible reset we wish you all could avoid, but really to position themselves for the future and to skip a generation. So every company knew they had to be digital. They knew they had to move, but they were moving too slow. This calls them to deal with the world the way it is, with you disrupt or you get disrupted. And so the speed of digitization was probably set ahead 3 years by the COVID issues. And that includes working from home, working remotely, productivity, et cetera.
Yeah, now, Unifor recently acquired a company called Motion Research Labs, which is video analytics, which is a little bit different than conversational. I know at Cisco, you were a big proponent of the fact that you needed to have a network that delivered voice, video, and data. Is there an AI parallel here for that?
An instant replay. You've nailed it, what Unifor is doing here. Basically, if you watch, the internet started out with data, just like AI started out with data. Then the next move, interestingly enough, was to voice, and then it was to video. And then it was all three combined in the same session like we're doing today. You'll see the exact same parallels in AI. And so when they move with video, suddenly they could be watching you as a customer service agent and watching the user if you decide to let them see your video for the reaction. Or they could put their own reaction up there so the customer could look at the reaction of the agent and be able to identify with them more than just a voice at the other end. So I think it goes data, then it goes voice, and then it goes video, and then it goes the combination of the three. Same play, just run faster.
All right. Well, let's pivot away from AI. I think we've covered that. Let's talk cyber here, right? You had brought up a cyber company. I'm sure you saw what happened with SolarWinds. I mean, the whole world saw that. What are some of the lessons we learned from that? Because I don't think many people are really aware of the supply chain attack until now.
Well, it's a combination of about 3 or 4 different elements that you said. The first thing that people realize is the world's much more digital than we thought. It's not just government agencies, it's our financial institutions, it's our supply chain, et cetera. And if an element gets taken down on it, the implications on everything from getting heat into your home, electricity, to your banking accounts, to the supply chain overall can very much be affected by it, or theft of data. When people talk about SolarWinds, we don't know if the issue is $1 trillion damage to the U.S. economy or multiple trillions. And that's kind of scary in of itself, and we probably never will know the full extent driven. But what it did was hit home to every boardroom and every CEO, regardless of size of company, that if you're not able to very quickly, ideally completely prevent, and then secondly, to see early stage that there's a problem, and then to mitigate it, and then to recover, you've got an issue. And so the old fashion of put a moat around your data and put it around your access points, et cetera, the bad guys just find a different way around. So I think the next generation of security will be through application aware, workload aware security as it goes across to your cloud within your company, et cetera. And interestingly, a company called Versec that is run by a young CEO by the name of Dave, who's really, really good. And I happen to have bought 2 of his prior companies at Cisco. So my experience with him has been very, very good. I started spending my time and investment about a year ago, and they were the only company that was able to prevent the attacks of SolarWinds, the attacks of Centurion in France, and the attacks that occurred in India with the smart grid from the nation state attack that would really endanger their grid future. So it's going to be more of a next generation cybersecurity as opposed to a perimeter or circle the wagons around an issue and try to prevent people from getting in. You've got to look at a constant flow of information as it goes across clouds of the companies. Think of it more from an application load, anticipate how the bad guys are going to come at you, and hopefully keep ahead. To the best of my knowledge, every government account, and that includes nation states in the Middle East as well as the business accounts that had this installed the right way, did not have an impact with the SolarWinds attack.
Yeah, well, again, we see the impact of AI within cyber, right? So that's another.
You got it.
Technology.
For good or for bad. They'll come at you both with cyber to protect it and AI to protect it, and they'll come at you with AI to enable the attacks as well by rogue nation states, et cetera.
Well, that's one thing I tell security pros. It's like you cannot fight AI-based attacks with manual methods, and so that's
impossible. Too fast.
That's a good lesson. The last technology I want to ask you about is 5G. This is a technology. 5G is interesting because it's the evolution of 4G, and if you ask some people, they'll tell you it's the savior of all mankind. If you ask other people, they'll say it's all hype. So I'm sure the answer is somewhere in the middle. But what kind of impact will 5G have on the world?
I think in the long term, it's going to have dramatic impact. But part of the reason it gets labeled as a little bit of hype, in the short term, it doesn't give you quite as quick a payback. So ZKast, I always look at what is the big picture. The big picture is we're going to move from 1,000 devices connected to the internet when Cisco was founded to, let's say, 18 billion today, to 500 billion definitely in 10 years, maybe in 5. And as those devices primarily move to the edge, et cetera, 5G's ability to capture that data, put applications off of that data, to be able to give feedback to either the smartphone, to your car, to sensor devices that regulate supply chain flow or temperatures, et cetera, is going to be dramatic. So that's why you see the service providers so excited about this, and companies like Ericsson as well, is as this occurs, it's going to open up new values they bring to their customers and new revenue opportunities as well. It's why one of the companies in this area that might surprise people, I think you remember the MPLS team from Cisco, Mario Prim, Luca, and Sony. You add to that Randy Pond, who was their CFO and supply chain lead, and my COO at Cisco as well. They formed a company called Pensando. And one of the major technology plays they're making is as the cloud moves to the edge, and 75% of all processing, security, applications run at the edge may never come back in the general market. You've got to combine the architectures of routing and switching and storage and compute, as we talked about, but you also need to provide the capability to capture this data, 5G at the edge. So one of the major companies that's interested in them is Ericsson from the 5G perspective. So I think it's going to be a very big, I think it will be a slower rollout than AI on it. Perhaps it's like all technologies, you and I've seen it over the last several decades. People get too excited about it. Then they get, oh, it's all hype, or it's just going to be a little bit. And then about the time people start to grow a little bit pessimistic, usually it takes off again. I think 5G's future is very good, but a little bit longer runway to take off than AI or cybersecurity does today.
Well, thanks, John. And and I visited the Pensando offices, and they certainly are building something impressive. So
they are the best engineering team of the world that moves with the speed. If you can imagine, they do 8 to 12 times the throughput, the effectiveness of what Amazon Web Services does with their architecture. That's
wow.
a whole order of magnitude, 10x more than what the leader in the industry does by using custom ASICs, software, and architecture designed to work together.
Okay, well, I just have one more question. I'm going to let you brag a little bit here. Of all the startups you've invested in, are there some that you think have really hit a home run and giving you payback that you thought would? Now we've mentioned a couple already, so
Sure.
if you want to mention them again, but I'm curious that you've made a lot of investments. Which ones are really having it?
Well, it's like, which one is your favorite child? The answer is you love them all. But the ones that I think have had the quickest payback and are very likely to have the quickest runway from here forward are the ones that we talked around artificial intelligence. The Unifor, the ASAP are very, very good. Sprinkler out of New York City, what Raji has done there has been amazing on it. I like the Pensando team mainly because they built $8 billion products with me, always number one with 50 to 70% market share and best margins of the industry. So the odds are pretty good they'll do it again on the 9th one in terms of the direction. And then, like all of us, I sometimes get enamored with my new favorite investment or shiny object, but I think both of these are going to be big. I love Cloudleaf and next generation supply chain, and what Mahesh is doing there I think is really exciting, and moving 2/3 of all the vaccines around this country by using that technology with the big players. And then Versec on security. They may have timed it perfect with the complexity of these nation state attacks that are occurring globally, and they could be one of the fastest growing security companies in the world if they execute well.
Well, thanks, John. I certainly appreciate your time. And if you're watching this, you heard it here. AI is going to be bigger than the internet. And actually, I think I've written that in a few of the posts that I've written. So I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the evolution of that, John. And I'm fascinated to see how your portfolio companies goes. And, you've been a great visionary, and thank you very much for your time.
This is my favorite.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day.
So thanks, and thanks for watching. This is ZS Caravallo from ZK Research, and I'll be back next week with another ZKast.